Welcome back to the Orange Arts podcast. I've got Pat with me from Apex Training Solutions. Pat, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Stoked to have you here. I'm always thankful and grateful for people that take time out of their day to spend time with me and have conversations. So I got a lot of questions for you. I'm sure other people will too. I'm hopeful that this conversation that we have today helps people in a lot of different ways, but mainly so that they get to know you a little bit more and kind of the mindset and the experiences that you've had and what I guess drives some of the information you bring to the interwebs, like on social media and whatnot. I love the takes, and I also like the different angles you hit things at. So I want to talk a little bit about that today. So let's start with talking about you just a little bit, kind of a bit about your background, kind of the bio thing. And this is the line I give everybody if you listen to the show, and that is, you can start and finish wherever you want. You just have to be patient with me because I'll probably stop you a couple of times to ask questions and get clarification. So ready, set, go.
Yeah, so I joined the Army at 17 back in 2002. Spent the next 23 years between the military, law enforcement, and emergency medical services. So I spanned three industries there within the public service community. And about 3 years ago, I started Apex. And the goal of Apex is to provide both, agencies and civilians firearms training, first aid training. We do active shooter training. We do some fitness mentoring, almost like a one-stop shop. But jack of all trades, master of none, is kind of how we look at it. But since starting Apex, man, it's been wild. I've met a bunch of cool people, had a lot of great training opportunities along the way.
Yeah. So I love that you're hitting, again, that this makes sense to me. Some of that I knew and some of it I didn't know, just with the angles that you hit and the insights that you bring to it, which I think is a bit unique. So let's talk just a little bit about like the first responder, law enforcement, medical response type of thing. Talk about some of the stuff you did there.
So I started off as a volunteer EMT in my hometown, Long Island, New York. Worked my way up to chief of department, did that professionally for a while. And then I came down to Florida where I became a cop. Once I was a cop, I served on patrol. I was a detective. I did undercover narcotics. I was on a SWAT team. Worked my way up to SWAT team leader. I worked just about every type of case you could think of. I worked homicide, child crimes, violent crimes, narcotics, stuff like that. So there was definitely, I got to see a whole wide spectrum of things within law enforcement, which was pretty awesome.
Large agency, small agency, what can you tell us?
By definition, it was a medium-sized agency. We're about 120, 130 guys and women. I think the national average, I've said this before, national average for a police department is 50 personnel. So we were a little bit bigger, but not definitely huge.
Yeah, that might surprise people, that average number, because I think we what we see and what we hear when we talk about challenges and resources and things that are available. Like when you're talking about an average of around 50, obviously that is not a ton of officers. I live in a city where we have somewhere, I think it's around 800 or 900 officers, which is the city PD that I live in. So it's fairly large. Right. And then, but we have neighboring cities that have much less than that, some less than 100, some more than 100. And then, you start getting up into Oakland, San Francisco, the numbers expand a little bit more in those major metropolitan areas. So, but one of the things I found is those that work for those medium to smaller agencies, they actually get their hands in quite a bit of a few things. And while sometimes I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, there aren't as many positions available to move into roles like detective or narcotics or whatever else. However, it seems that you get an opportunity to kind of cross all of those things, maybe at a larger volume of it. That's not the right word, but you get to do different things versus getting into something and you stay there for a very long time, which limits how many things you could actually experience over that time. So, yeah. The agency thing, again, I think is something that people might find interesting if they had no idea, especially if you're living in a large city. So, getting your hands and fingers into and feet, into a lot of different stuff. Talk a little bit about Apex and like who are your clients or who are the people that are coming to you. You mentioned it's law enforcement and it's civilians, but Like, who are these people? Where are they coming from, and why do they seek you out?
So we do get a really interesting cross section of people from all over. We'll get, older women who want to carry a firearm for the first time. We'll get entities that want some active shooter training, offices, corporations, stuff like that. And then we'll get my newest thing has been police recruits, starting to prep them up to get them ready for the academy. And so that's been super interesting, and that's kind of been the focus lately. But I would say it's definitely I can't call it, man. I get people from all over every day. It's like I meet somebody new coming from a different background with a different kind of request.
So that's not uncommon to me, just with regard to like the different types of people. But what I am hearing actually quite a bit more are these recruits or candidates that are going into law enforcement. And I would assume it's mainly law enforcement. Is it also the military? Is it crossing over into that?
A little bit of military,
I mean,
but I
Florida's
was
full of that, so that's why I asked.
right. Yeah, no, military would probably be kind of the minority, but
Okay.
it's mostly law enforcement.
Okay, so you got these law enforcement candidates, and who are these people? Like, because this leads to the larger conversation we're going to have today. But like, who are these recruits? Who are these candidates coming to you? What the specifics of that question are: where are they in life? What kind of experiences do they have or not have? What is their mindset coming in? Can you kind of elaborate on a little bit of that?
Yeah, sure. So I'll get a middle-aged woman who's never touched a gun before and wants to become a police officer. And then, the next phone call I may get will be a 21-year-old infantryman who wants to put in for the academy. And he's looking to, hey, give me the inside line on how different it is. What can I expect? What am I looking at? Again, law enforcement has a very interesting cross section of people too, especially today. They're coming from all walks of life, all varying, experiences. And that's been one of the challenges with us is, finding the student, assessing their experience or their skill level, and then creating a training plan, to help get them through the academy or, set them up for success in their career.
So I know of a couple of agencies that actually have a pre-academy. I use that in air quotes. In some cases, that's what they're calling it. And they're basically doing that very thing. But this is after the hiring process is after that's happened. These folks that are coming to you, are they already in the hiring process, or are they thinking about getting into the hiring process? Where are they in the steps there?
So Florida is different. You can self-sponsor your way through the police academy. So you don't necessarily need to be picked up by an agency in
Okay.
order to attend the police academy. Like I self-sponsored my way, using the GI Bill through the academy, and I applied to agencies while I was in the academy. And then there's the other half, which they do get picked up ahead of time, and they're already hired on the agency, and the agency puts them through the academy. So again, it's a different split. Some are sponsored, some are not.
Do you find a different level of commitment from those that are self-sponsored versus those which aren't?
Um,
I mean, and when I say commitment, I mean just a commitment level to their training, or maybe this is leading, but a higher sense of drive or more of a connection to it?
no, I think that's real individual based. I've seen some guys that were sponsored that just felt they were on easy street because they were already hired on by an agency. And then I saw some kids that were sponsored that were real hungry because they want to succeed. And then, vice versa with the self sponsors.
Well, that's good to know. Okay, interesting. All right. So when they're coming to you, what are they looking for specifically? What skills, what knowledge are they specifically seeking from you on the law enforcement side?
Predominantly, it's firearms training. A lot of
Okay.
them, and I'm a little surprised, a lot of people have never fired a weapon before. And now they're going into a job profession where they're carrying a weapon full time. And that can be very intimidating. And that's one of the things that we like to bring them in and, get them comfortable in using and handling and shooting. That way, once they get to the academy, they're not shell shocked.
Yeah. So you spend 5 minutes on the internet and you'll see all the complaints that come out about all the training that officers don't get, or the minimal amounts, or the low standards. Again, this is part of the larger conversation we're getting into. But I find that interesting. Not that I'm sure over the last 100 years, there's been a lot of police recruits that have gone in that have not fired a firearm. But I wonder what the percentage is like these days versus maybe what it was 20 years ago in terms of those that are comfortable and somewhat knowledgeable around firearms versus now. I mean, do you have any sense of this? Because you've been at this a while.
I mean, I think it's region dependent. Down here in Florida, guns are very common. They're very much a part of people's way of life. I come from New York City and Long Island where guns are very taboo. So a lot of
Hmm.
people probably have very minimal exposure to firearms up north or in states where they're very restrictive versus down here.
Yeah, so regionally, this could play a big part of this. All right, so I just curiously on that particular population, does uh, what are the biggest surprises that they're getting, or what are the biggest surprises that you've had along the way in this journey over the last couple of years with that population and the firearms training?
Um, the amount of preconceived notions or misconceptions and myths that people hear, whether they get it from TV and media or they heard it from a guy, heard it from a guy, who heard it from a guy, tons of just myths about firearms or what they believe the law says in terms of
Okay,
one big thing would be the laws regarding self-defense.
okay.
Everybody claims to know the law, but they don't. It's always this kind of urban legend that they had heard or this myth.
Can you be specific there? Like, give me like an example of something.
But my favorite one, you can't shoot someone in the back even if they're in your house. And
Okay,
I say, well, tell me more.
it
You know,
depends, right?
it depends, right? My answer always totality of circumstances. Tell me more. If a bad guy or an intruder breaks into my house and they're running down my hallway towards my daughter's room, well, yeah, best believe you get shot in the back.
Right.
Right. So no, that would be a myth. There are the law is not black and white when it comes to those kind of situations.
Yeah, obviously, and unless you're asking those questions or talking to somebody like yourself that obviously has experience and understands the law, and that's what I pick up from actually a good deal of what I see you putting out socially is your level of awareness in terms of what case law is, and you're actually challenging people with it now, which I think is really cool. So just kind of moving into the social media piece, some of the things I've seen you do, it's diverse, it's dynamic in a way where it's engaging and it gets people to think a little bit more, which I really enjoy. It's taught me a lot, to be honest. And one of those things is posing a question about something very specific like that, and then giving people kind of a multiple choice, like, what
Mhm.
do you think here? And I wonder, because I don't see all the answers, you see those answers. I wonder how that's been for you since I've seen you doing that, which I feel like it's probably been maybe in the last 6 or 8 weeks or something like that. What have you learned from this?
So I love posing case law and I love posing scenarios to people because part of being a police officer is, again, the totality of circumstances. What would you do? And let's talk about the legality of why you would do it. What gives you the authority to do it? What are the ramifications of it long term? And the majority of people, I'll say, I was very impressed with how many people get what I'm asking correct. And I'm like, that's
Oh, that's
awesome.
good.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's great.
There's some that I'll set people up, just to get them thinking, and a lot of people get them wrong, or it's something real obscure. But we have really good conversations in the DMs and emails with guys just going back and forth, wanting to know why, and then we'll go ahead and we'll explain it to them. And most people are really super interested and super open to learning.
So again, my experience with you is anytime I've asked you a question or post something, you do go longer form in the DMs or whatever to kind of work things out or provide some personal experience, and you also providing kind of the counterpoint to it, which it's not, you're not slamming something down somebody's throat saying this is what it is and this is why, and this is why you should do it this way. It's like, here's the things you need to think about, but my experience in it has been here, and or very specifically, uh I guess calling out like, I need more information, not trying to just give an answer, which I think this is where kind of social media has gone, is like, what's the answer I need to give people to drive engagement, and or to be very controversial to get more engagement. And so I see this as being like very practical kind of educational platform. And I see you doing it in a couple of different ways. You've done it on the fitness side. And you're very outspoken about where you believe, law enforcement needs to be from a fitness perspective and a health and wellness perspective. In fact, there was a post that you put up on, I believe this week. We're recording this on a Wednesday. It was like a Monday post, and it was about how to eat on the road. If you're eating, as an officer, because it's, you're out, you're on the road, especially if you're on patrol or whatever, and if you're not thinking about things, you know, here's the pitfalls you can fall into. But and we'll acknowledge this. We'll acknowledge that this is a problem and this is a thing for people. When I say a problem, I mean more of a challenge. But here's a solution for it. And here's an easy way to think about it. And again, the solutions-based mindset guys are the guys that I want to talk to. So in saying that, I encourage people to go check out your page on Instagram, because it's got all kinds of cool stuff. And make sure you're playing in the stories. Go look at the stories, because there's so much content you're putting in the stories outside of what's just happening in your feed. And you're very, very active there. And then also encourage people, like, this is a dude that wants to answer questions for people and leave the world a better place than he found it, kind of thing. And these are the things you've learned along the road. I found it to be very practical. And like I said, it's helped me. So I want to move into this concept of fitness and law enforcement. And I want to talk about some things and some successes and failures you've had. We just talked on the phone for the first time just this week, on Monday, as a matter of fact. And I was like, do we got to stop this conversation? I want to save the rest of this for the podcast, so that we can kind of work through some things, going back to being solutions minded and working through problems. And what I got from you in that conversation was your understanding of what the realities of things are, your understanding of what the excuses or roadblocks that administration, that officers, that the public is going to run into here. And there are ways to navigate through this. You've had your own challenges and your own successes. And so I want to talk through that stuff. But the larger conversation is around fitness and law enforcement. And I've been kind of stuck on this one for a while, because I have learned a ton about the mindset around it and kind of the culture around it, probably more in the last 4 to 6 months than I'd ever known. And it's all because I've had conversations with guys like you, right? Just who's actually talking about this stuff in a productive way. And they are not stepping back on anything in terms of their beliefs and what they believe to be the right way of doing things, and that there should be a standard of some kind. Standards are tough, right? Because it goes agency to agency, region to region, whether you're with a state or municipal agency. And the thing that I found, obviously, is number one is a large problem. Nothing's standardized anywhere. You can't go anywhere and find the same thing from city to the neighboring city. You're not going to find that. Secondly, I found the culture is there's kind of heroes and villains in this thing. And I'll say this, and this is going to probably come up again. Some of those heroes, I think, are portrayed as villains because they are staying hard on their platform of this is not okay, right? And we need to keep we can't let up on that. So where we're at right now is not okay for a lot of reasons, but we're not okay. That said, here are some solutions, and here are some things that we've that I've seen be successful, and how it's been successful. And here's some things that have made it tremendously unsuccessful. And so I want to kind of carve through some of those things. So I'll stop talking here and ask the question. Talk about your experience with law enforcement fitness standards, and maybe just kind of talk us through that journey on how that happened for you. You were in the Army, you came out, you went into the military, you came out, you went into law enforcement, probably already fairly fit. Have you ever been out of shape in your life?
So in high school, I was a skinny, small guy.
Yep.
I was a little faster and wiry than I was strong. I don't think I was naturally pound for pound very, very strong. But I always played sports. I always had,
Okay.
a good level of fitness. When I joined the Army, it's when I discovered how small I actually was, and I needed to start lifting, and I got into that whole world. You fall off the wagon from time to time.
Sure.
But, then I'm very hard on myself. So I just start feeling guilty, and I pick myself up and I get myself back to the gym. But I mean, I've been working out for 23 years, so it's something that's super important to me for like a billion different reasons, both as a father, as a professional, as a man, just as a healthy human. I believe fitness is the core of a lot of things, and it helps you in terms of longevity as you get older.
Yeah. So those are intrinsic things or values that you already have embedded or downloaded onto the hard drive. And you've had some experiences where you were forced to discover you were less than, right? You
Yeah.
were the skinny, wiry guy who then recognized, like, I got to be stronger. Um, and that happened early in life. So I would assume this is what, 18, 19 years old?
I was 17 years old when I graduated basic training. So
Okay. So
super early in life.
that's early, right? So then you have, like you said, you have 20 years of kind of going through the journey. So going back to kind of these recruits or the folks that you're seeing kind of come out, or even the people that you worked with when you were active law enforcement, I don't know. I don't know if the question is like the percentage of people that didn't have anywhere near the same experience that you have versus those that did. And again, not like 20 years because you were in this much earlier than 20 years ago, much sooner than 20 years ago. But or my point is like how many people are coming in with any type of experience versus the people that are coming in with zero? Because I think this is an important thing to kind of note and for people to understand.
I think, when I was at my agency, I saw classes getting hired on where all of them were obese. I saw classes getting hired on where all of them were fit. You couldn't call it ahead of time. I think that came down to the recruiting.
Okay.
Just whoever was doing the recruiting at the time, that's what they decided they were going to get. But I did notice over the years, it appeared to get worse and worse and worse. And maybe out of every class, like that would come in, you'd get one or two PT studs, and the rest were either middle of the road or completely out of shape.
Okay, so again, I think this is important to note because, again, going back to those that are taking a hard line, which I think is the right thing to do. You should be taking a hard line at some level, but your experience versus everybody else's experience could be very, very different. And whether it's class to class or agency to agency or whatever else, and so there's a large. Can we agree? There is a very large population of people that really haven't had a lot of experience. So if they haven't had a lot of experience, they likely haven't had a lot of success. Some people are kind of just naturally they're athletes, or that it's easier for them maybe to get fit. They have more physical ability, and not because they're in shape, so to speak, because that could be defined a lot of different ways. And I want to talk about that, like what is fitness? Because I think that's another problem, is that's not been clearly defined. But um, again, calling out that if you're expecting somebody that has zero clue, and I'm not even talking about education, I'm just talking about experience, to somehow come on board with this and be successful with a fitness program or some type of a fitness standard, you're fighting a losing battle there. There's some underlying things that folks need. And you can move into the academy situation where they go through, and there is a level of standard that has to happen there. And I've talked about that quite a bit on the show with some other guys. I don't want to dig too deep into that, but they get fit by default, right? No matter where they came in, they get fit for the thing that they're doing by default, because that's what you're doing all the time. And there's a standard that you have to meet because you have to keep your job and you have to make it, pass a test and get to the next thing. But how much education of what they're doing and why they're doing it happens at the academy?
Well, I can speak for my academy. We did do PT in the beginning. It almost just seemed like a beat down session, right? In terms of the discipline, that basic training mindset. PT wasn't often. It was done. They did have periodic PT tests. However, I discovered on graduation day that passing wasn't mandatory. And it actually upset me because I was giving 100% every single PT test. And on graduation day, we had our final PT test and a couple of guys failed. And they were still allowed to graduate that night. And I remember being super upset. Well, because I was like, well, why did I try this entire time
Hmm.
when these guys didn't have to? And they were allowed to walk across the aisle, with us tonight anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So that sets up a little bit of kind of like a moral injury. Like, wait, hold on. We say there's a standard, right? There's people working hard like yourself to meet or exceed that standard. And then, but we still let people get through whether or not they meet it or not. That would upset me too, especially finding out at the end. I think I'd be really pissed. I don't know if I'd be less pissed if I found out earlier on, and how that would affect my mindset in terms of how hard I tried. I would like to think that it wouldn't affect that at all with regard to where I tried to achieve on my own. But I can imagine that's a thing for people. I just wonder about like the mindset. What does that set up for the person that didn't pass the thing? but still got graduated through? I mean, just in your mind, what things come to mind for you?
Well, I mean, I can tell you I had a direct conversation with one of them because he worked at the same agency with me. And
Oh,
I was like,
let's hear about that.
yeah, and I was like, dude, what? And he's like, well, I passed the one to get in, so I'm fine. It doesn't matter. Who cares? It's like pretty much verbatim. And I just remember being like, oh, okay, well, I see where your work ethic is. And, later on down the line, it showed in his career. But I just a terrible mindset to have. And you'd be surprised at how common that mindset is in the industry, which, part of the bigger conversation directly leads to some of the issues that, the job has.
So values, right? And where we're placing value on certain things. So values and value are not the same thing. You already kind of talked about the value of fitness and the values that you have around fitness, in where those things are rooted, and they're rooted. Some of the things you said were for your health, for your family, as a father, as a man, as a dad, all those kind of things. It wasn't so that you could go run the mile and a half in X amount of time, or squat, or deadlift a certain amount of weight, or do X amount of push-ups or whatever. And again, there's values in those metrics, if you will, when you start to add up like kind of what fitness is, which will be the next question I'll get to here in a second. But when somebody says to you, it doesn't matter, well, then what does? And that's the question I have, and I've been trying to ask, like, what are we valuing we're kind of at the academy level right now. In your mind, like, what are we valuing as law enforcement officers, or what is the admin valuing in their law enforcement officers across the board for the skills, for the material, the raw material they have to have in order to perform their job well on the street every day? And having done as many things as you can do, or you've done, I imagine you have some thoughts on this, and I'd like to hear those.
Yeah, well, there's a textbook answer, right? Where well, we value an officer's ethics, we value their integrity, we value their investigative ability, we value their level of fitness and their ability to shoot. And then there's real life where, hey, we just got to get cars filled, beats covered, schedule handled. We got to get guys to answer these calls. And you know what? They've met all the standards set forth by the state of Florida or whatever state you're in. That means they're good enough. So there's the hopes and dreams, and then there's a reality, and then a lot of guys kind of fall in
Something in
between.
between.
Right.
Right. There's that gap in between. That's been the biggest challenge for me. Is like, because if you're coming out with like, okay, so let's go back to the fitness piece, the guy in the academy that you had the conversation with. You've already told me that you don't care, it doesn't matter. I don't know if the question ever came up. Well, then what does matter? What have they been taught to? What has been instilled that what needs to matter? And I wonder, like, with a guy like that, and obviously you can't answer the question for him, but I just wonder what your thoughts are on, like, what do you think matters to the guy?
Well, as time goes on and you get to know people, you kind of see their behavior and how they prioritize things. And, this ended up being a lazier officer who did the bare minimum. And that's how he chose to handle his career. If that's acceptable by agency standards, that's on the agency.
Yeah, agreed. Now, as compared to the other officers that you work with, like, I'm sure you're not the only one feeling like this. What does that do to the team?
A lot of guys, high performers, most high performers will just dissociate from those people. And then they tend to gravitate towards each other. And I was on really, really awesome units where there were a lot of higher performers and we held each other accountable. And, comments get made, that guy's not too good, or, comments get made, but you just focus on what you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
And you try and put all that negativity aside. And that's just kind of how a lot of guys like to, navigate through their careers.
Yeah, sure. So you're gonna glom to, or you're gonna be attracted to the people that share more of the same values and work ethic and things that you've already mentioned here. And I get that. I just, like, again, I'm looking across the board and kind of what we're getting from law enforcement right now, and how that a lot of that is transferred on through the years. And here we are at this point where there seems to be a lot of infighting and a lot of disconnect between the officers themselves in terms of, like, who matters and who doesn't. And you're going out on the street every day. And so what you have is these, like, clubs, right, within clubs. And it seems like you have a large number, it appears, you have a large number of officers, and I'm not saying this about everybody. I'm not saying about all the new people. I'm not saying that this is directly related to fitness or not. But it seems there's a lot of people that are kind of going and they're just punching the clock and they're like, I'm going to do my job and I'm going to go home at the end of the day and this is what I signed up to do and I'm good. And I don't ever want to be a part of a club. I don't ever want to be a part of something bigger or part of a group of people that's going to push me to get better, to train harder, to work harder, to feel more connected to this. To me, that's a challenge. Obviously, from the fitness perspective, that I have larger challenges around it, and I probably have a larger connection to that. But I guess what what really bothers me is that this has been institutionalized now, that it's okay to be like that. And it's okay to come and just check in and check out as long as you're good enough. And look, there's sometimes, who is it that says, I heard my Mark Smith says, sometimes good enough is good enough, right? Good enough is. What is that? And again, going back to standards, which we're going to get into here, I not having something to measure up to or something that supposedly is supposed to be measured and then ends up not being measured at all or doesn't matter in the end. It gets measured, but it doesn't matter how you do, how the breakdowns happen. And then we get to a point where the person that these things didn't matter to then ends up becoming a team leader or is in a leadership or administrative position, and how that then basically reinforces all the negative that comes along with that over the years. And now that's kind of what we're faced with. And the challenge in kind of undoing that sticky web is, well, I guess the challenge is undoing that sticky web and how to find a way to do it and get people more on the same page so that the group does come together. And those people, that middle group, there's a larger percentage of that middle group that's trying to level up. And that bottom end of that group is looking at it going, oh, well, if this is the new normal now, and it's just a couple of percentage points, whatever that is, that I need to be doing a little better. And I like to just come in and do my job and be left alone and fly under the radar and whatever else. They might level up to that too, just so that they can fly under the radar and not be bothered about it. Would you agree with that statement or not? Is that an accurate outlook on how things might go?
Yeah, and I agree with that. And one of the things I like to say is you can't expect performance you don't demand. So, from an administrative standpoint, no matter where you are, any business, any industry, when you demand a certain level of performance, you'll get guys and girls who want to either go above and beyond, or you have people that just want to meet that standard and be the gray man and just kind of cruise through life. And that's okay.
That's
But,
okay.
but you need to set a standard high enough as a leader that benefits whatever profession you're in. So
The
far as law
organization.
enforcement, right? So far as law enforcement, when you set a standard and you set a culture, within your agency that says, "Hey, you will perform at this level." Well, if you want high performers, we'll raise that bar just a little bit. Nothing crazy, but attainable. But the problem becomes when you remove that bar completely, which is very, very common in today's
It's
day and age in
apparent.
law enforcement.
Mm.
When you remove that bar completely and then bad things happen, and then the think tanks come back and go, well, how did this happen? Well, I can tell you where it started. You removed
Right.
any and all standards.
So let's talk about that. So on the fitness end of things. So that was interesting what you said there about there was a fitness standard at the academy, but in the end, it wasn't really a qualifier at all. So I can't imagine that there would be any leveling up at all from a fitness perspective, and trying to get that at some point now would be extraordinarily difficult because they were never asked they were never held accountable to any kind of a standard, and trying to implement one of those now I don't want to say it's impossible, but it would take a lot of time to undo that for an agency, even with an agency of 50. The more obviously the higher the numbers, the harder it becomes because you have more people you got to impact. So I understand that at some point you wanted to champion and be behind getting this underway and instituting some type of a program that could help people get better. And a lot of that centers around setting a standard and how to set the standard. Can you walk us through kind of the experience you went through?
Absolutely. So I believe it was in 2018. It was some years ago. I think it was 2018. My agency approached me and said, "Hey, would you like to go to this fitness coordinator program to learn how to stand up, a physical fitness program and implement some new standards?" So it was
So
myself. Go
so
ahead.
this isn't is this a like a post certification type of program, or is this something outside like third party?
It was third party. It was through a
Okay.
private entity. They were called Fit Force. I'm not sure if they're still around. I actually
Okay.
checked their website the other day. It looks like they haven't really updated it in a
It's
while.
dead.
But
Okay.
yeah, maybe they are, maybe they're not. I'm not sure. But they were supposed to be similar to the Cooper standard, which anybody in law enforcement knows. A Cooper standard is kind of like what everybody uses.
Yeah, but for those that don't, basically what we're talking about is a mile and a half run, a shuttle run, and push-ups and sit-ups, correct?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if Cooper does a shuttle. It's the mile and a half run, 300-meter sprint, push ups, sit ups. And, some agencies add to it, but like we did a high jump that I
Okay.
thought was kind of pointless, but that was part of ours in the academy.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, I got asked to go to the course, and it was a very interesting course where we spent the majority of the time learning all the case law on the legalities behind discrimination and implementing fitness programs, Americans with Disability Act, Civil Rights Act. Super, super interesting. And they laid out
Hmm.
the framework on how long it would take to implement a new physical fitness standard, which at a minimum was 3 years. So it
Okay.
was almost like a monumental task to do.
So going back, who approached you on this? Like, was this somebody from like the health and wellness coordinator that was working with some team of people? Like, how did that happen?
I don't remember, but I feel like it was a captain. They knew I was into fitness.
Okay.
A lot of people took a liking to me pretty quick, when I first got there. So they were like, "Hey, you seem motivated, man. You want to go do this?" I
Okay.
said, "Sure."
Yeah, so that's very common, right? There's again, I use the term champion. There's always somebody that's some maybe it's the PT stud, but they also have sort of they're enigmatic in a way. Like everybody just kind of recognizes, like if you need fitness advice, or if you wanted to talk to somebody about nutrition, whatever, that's the guy. That's the person you go talk to at the department, or he seems to always be on it. He's always working out. He's always willing to give the information and have the conversations with people. And all the people that I've talked to that have done and are talking about this in a productive way are those people. They're the people that like I just want to help people. Like, well, I see this getting better, and yes, I'm frustrated by it, but the frustration doesn't outweigh my wanting to see it get better for everybody for so many reasons, right? And you mentioned again the values piece at the beginning, the value of fitness and health. So, okay, so you go away. So, two things that came up there. One is the legalities of placing a standard on a law enforcement officer, physical fitness standard, and it would be I would imagine this isn't just law enforcement. This is across the board. If you're an employer and you're telling somebody they have to meet certain markers of health and fitness, there's stuff that goes into this. Can you be specific about some of this stuff?
Correct. So going back to the Civil Rights Act of 1965 and 1991, where they started ruling on, male standards versus female standards and, gender norming. Uh, it was actually super complex. I had no clue that Civil Rights Act had anything to do with physical fitness, and it dives even further to overall fitness versus job specific task assessment. It's actually a very complex conversation that you need to have and really look at your program and say, does this meet all these parameters?
So this goes back to the larger whole. Like what should the standard be, and how does it fit the entire whole versus a specific team or a specific group of individuals, which is within the larger group of individuals. And I'm talking about, let's just talk about this agency of 50-ish, right? So you can't come in and just say, well, all the fit guys are doing this, so this should be the standard, and we should meet the markers of this collective fitness group, if you will, because obviously there's a lot of people there that might not ever get to that standard, right? They're just too far behind. There's just not going to happen. So how do you adjust that, and how do you make it legal but also fair? And when I say fair, I don't mean like this person shouldn't have to do this because, well, how do we get them better so that they can at least get closer to the standard would be the question I would be asking. But my point in this is then, okay, so we have this larger collective group, and it seems to be the people that are driving it are the most fit people. So I think that obviously, I think what that does is it it basically eliminates or isolates a larger number of people. If we're being honest, this is again what I've discovered. There's a much larger population of unfit people than there are fit people in that profession. But going down to like implementing a standard, then how do you define what the standard should be? Like, what are the markers? And you mentioned Cooper. Now, Cooper's always going to have long standing, at least as long as I'm going to be alive, right? There's a lot of research put into that. It costs a lot of money, and it's already been adopted. Just like a lot of other things, if you have if a law or a policy has already been put in place about this is how we do or don't do something, very hard to overturn that. Agreed or disagreed?
Oh, absolutely. Super hard.
Yeah, so because that's and it takes a long time to do that, and it's usually, unfortunately, the things that usually override or get those things to turn quickly is when something really bad happens, right? Where it's, and we saw that in spades over the last kind of 3 or 4 years with some of the stuff that's happened. Now, good luck overturning that, right? And going back the other way, we have now just gone further into the hole in a lot of areas. However, I can tell you this, some of that stuff that I live in California, and there were certain assembly bills that were in legislation that happened a long time ago, 10 or more years ago. And we're finally now just sort of overturning some of those things. Some things happened in the last 4 years, and it's now being overturned. You know, when we talk about some of the props that are out there, Prop 47, Prop 36 that just came through on our end, where like we're starting to arrest people for stealing stuff again, right? And for robbing stores and burglarizing places, where just 2 months ago you'd get cited and released on something. Now you're going to go to jail, right? And you're going to face jail time for stuff. So my point of that is usually it takes something really drastic, and it takes a lot of times the public to come forward and start pressuring leadership, administrators, city leadership, administrators, and things like that to make things happen and ultimately kind of work its way up through the state. But to your point, like this huge undertaking, one of the things that has to be set forth is understanding how to create whatever the standard is. And so I wonder for you, and this is not a loaded question, it's just for you, like, what is fitness like for a law enforcement officer? Like, how do you define it? Like, what should we be measuring? How do you wrap it up? What's important? What should we value?
Well, just in my experience, if you were to just break down the tasks and, break down your critical incidents, and that will tell you what is necessary in law enforcement, right? So, in a nutshell, it's a sprint followed by some kind of physical altercation. And then, God forbid, but sometimes it happens, use of deadly force. So,
Mm-hmm.
if we were to break those things down, what do you need? Yeah, you need some high intensity training. Your cardio needs to be on point.
Mm-hmm.
That's to get you to the fight. And then once you're at the fight, what do you need? You need some form of, training and any fight discipline. Guys can debate which one's better. But then you also need some strength, because you could be the fastest guy in the world and 140 pounds, but the guy you're chasing is 6'5", 250,
All
shredded
right.
muscles. So the second you get there, you're going to have a real problem.
Now what? Right.
Yeah, exactly. So to
What
me, it's
matters
always
now?
been high intensity training, and strength training is
Okay.
absolutely necessary.
So if we break this down, kind of when I think about high intensity training, I think of things that are really going to press physiologically. They're going to press the systems. They're going to press your fuel systems or your energy systems in a way that help you be better in varying degrees of whatever the thing it is that you're doing. Whether it's in a lot of times that's time, right? So how much time do I have to do this thing for? Like again, like how long do I have to sprint for? Is this actual sprint or is this a long run? In your career, what was the longest sprint you ever had to do?
I was in 1 foot pursuit that I'm pretty sure when we clocked it, it was over a mile.
Really?
It
Okay.
was probably it was obviously the wildest
One
pursuit I was
time
ever
though.
in. And this guy was so fast that he would stop running, put his hands on his head and walk. And we were still trying to catch him. That's how fast this guy was.
Okay. So that's one incident.
Yeah.
Compare that against the majority.
30 seconds, 40 seconds max, usually.
Okay.
Usually.
So like already we go back to Cooper standard, and I'm not saying there's no value in it. I'm just looking at it like, how valuable is that mile and a half run time, right? In the reality of the things that happen on a regular basis, or the higher propensity stuff that a law enforcement officer is doing. And can I just ask, like, when you did this, were you on patrol, or was this when you were working narcotics or on the SWAT team? When
I
did
was
that
on
happen?
patrol when I went to that class.
Okay. No, sorry, that incident where you had to
Oh no,
run.
I was on a street unit when that happened.
Okay. All right. I just curious. All right. So then let's talk about the strength piece, because you said the strength thing matters. Give me some examples of where strength shows up.
I mean, when you go to detain somebody, you're going to grab them, and you're going to instantly
Mhm.
find out what they're made of. Instantly. I've grabbed guys, and I'm 6 foot, 215 pounds. I'm not very small, and I've grabbed guys that were unbelievably strong, and I knew almost instantly we were going to have a problem. So grip strength is a huge thing. Uh, just being able to push and pull weight, and guys can break that down however they want. I don't like to tell or force my beliefs
Right.
on people, but your ability to push and pull weight is very, very, very important.
So that's where I was going with this. Like, okay, so you're setting it up, because the question I asked is probably fairly obvious for people to think about law enforcement officers and what they have to do. All right, so you mentioned that. Then you mentioned there's skills that are involved, right?
Mhm.
So you can have grip strength, but if you don't know what to do with your grip, right, or how to
Correct.
position yourself, obviously there's issues there. So it's not just the foundational fundamentals of some cardiovascular fitness, right, some muscular endurance, stuff, and then muscular strength. It's what do you do with that, and how are you measuring that, and what's valued there. So going back to Cooper standards and the very basic things you had to do in the academy, if there's not a connection being made between the things that you're being made to do in PT, which you said is wasn't very much. Maybe it wasn't very much for you, but maybe to clarify, are you saying that the frequency was low in terms of how many days or how
It
much
was
time
low
you PT?
frequency. Yeah, it was low
Okay.
frequency.
Okay. So it's not like you're doing it every day.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know a lot of places do it every single day, right? You start the day there, and there's something
Mhm.
maybe in the middle of the day that you do also. But again, I'm pulling the pieces together. Like, where's what I'm doing right now? How does that connect with what I will be doing on the job? And then again, coming up with standards. Um, what are the things that I should be training, or what standards should I be meeting to make those two come together? And I'm not sure that Cooper does that really well, if I'm being
Uh,
honest.
I don't think it has any applicability in that arena, to be honest with you. If you were to just break it down, my sit up score has never affected my ability in a fight.
Yeah, of all things, I have a lot of things to say about sit-ups, but and how many push-ups you can do. I mean, I
Right.
think there's a measure of some things, some correlation that you can make there. But you just mentioned, I don't care how many push-ups you can do if you're 140 pounds and you got to go hands-on with the 250 pounder dude. Or, it's just it's pretty inconsequential at that point. There's things,
Mhm.
so there's skills that are involved with this. All right. That's another thing. So let's go back to the course that you went through, and then you mentioned legalities. You mentioned kind of how long a program would take to get together. What are the things that they're bringing to the table in terms of how to set standards and what those standards should be?
So they pretty much said that the standards were subjective, and that your chief or your sheriff can decide whatever standard they can pick, and they had a little chart that was, 1% to 100%. And they had a whole, set of scores in between. And they said, look, your chief or your sheriff can decide at any point, they can decide what percentage is passing for them. They just need to decide which one it is. So it'd be a real subjective thing. If you had a real go-getter sheriff, maybe they pick a higher score. If you had a real low performing chief, maybe they pick a lower score. Who knows? But it was as simple as just that, lead officer, that lead, um, chief or sheriff needs to decide what it's going to be.
And this was based on Cooper?
No, this was based on Fit Force had their own standards,
Let's
very
talk about it.
similar. Yeah, so it was very similar to Cooper. There were some differences, and like we discussed earlier, I believe their push-ups and sit-ups were unbroken. So it
Okay.
was how many can you do straight, not in 2 minutes. I think it was a
Okay.
2 minute time cap, but it was when you stopped, it was over. There was no sagging in the middle, arch in the back, resting. There was none of that.
No stopping at the top to hold, to
Correct.
then crank out two more, to then stop, to then crank out two more, that kind of thing.
Right.
Under the time limit that you had to do this in.
Correct. And then there was a shuttle run, which debate its applicability. I'm not sure. I'm big on mobility and agility. Do I think shuttle run is the best? measurements for that. I don't know. Maybe not,
Okay.
but debatable. They did a 300-meter sprint similar to Cooper and the mile-and-a-half run.
Okay. Okay. So there was nothing in there specific to one of the things you said was really important, which is the strength piece. Was that
Correct.
ever talked about at all?
We discussed it, and they even had us make mock-up like training programs and strength training programs, but as an exercise, but it didn't apply to the test. So I actually, for myself as a student, I wasn't sure what the desired end state was. I was like, what are you trying to teach me? How to make a program? Or is there actually some kind of applicability towards the test? But it turned out there wasn't.
And therein lies the problem, right? Again, therein lies the problem is we're not making connection with the thing. It's more like, how do we institute the things that have already been instituted with a little bit of nuance? Again, unbroken push-ups as being one of those things, and maybe a little bit of a different time standard on a shuttle run or a mile-and-a-half run. But we really haven't changed much, and we haven't addressed root issues, which are strength matters, right? And what do you get from strength training? It's not just so that you can go hands-on with the bigger, more stronger person. What strength brings to the table in terms of resiliency, and your ability to do the things. Like, strength is kind of the platform that all things are going to be built on. So, and the movement piece, which you said are two very important things. And I would say, if I had to pick two of the most important things, it would be strength and your ability to move. So movement. And those things that's a very high level statement, and you can obviously dig down into a lot of areas. But if you just focus on those two things, the programming piece and the standards that you could probably pick to make sure that people were getting better at those things and be measurably better, and then the connection points that you can make about how this makes you better in all things. Again, your ability to recover from your workouts, your ability to recover from an incident, your ability to recover from day to day, a long week at work, whatever your specific job tasks are. I think those things are applicable across the board. Agreed or disagreed?
No, absolutely. And I have a bunch of friends. One thing that we talked about all the time was, back injuries are very common in law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
And I would tell guys, I say, hey, look, weak backs get injured. You have to train your core. You have to train your back. It's proven, and we could debate this all day, but it's proven the stronger your back is, the less likely you are to get injured, unless you're doing something stupid, and then yes, you can get injured. But, being sedentary, not training any type of core strength or just back strength, and then personally, I believe it has an absolute direct correlation to, increase in back injuries.
Yeah, I mean, back injuries are super common across the board, whether inside law enforcement or not inside. I think it's still 1 in 5 Americans has a low back issue. It's likely going to happen, but there's a higher potential for that to happen, obviously, if you lack strength and lack mobility,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or your ability to move. And these things come up usually in the most common things. It's not an incident, that happens that creates, or that where the back injury shows up, or the back problem, let's just say, shows up. It's in the everyday stuff that they're doing. And one day they got the trunk of the car open, they reach over to pick up, I don't know, the med bag, the lunch box, whatever it happens to be, or they drop their keys, they bend over, rotate, reach, and they stand up,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like they quote unquote throw their back out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why did that happen? It wasn't because you were in that foot pursuit that ended in the wrestling match, for at the end of that thing. It was something basic, and that's telling, and that's how most humans get hurt. And I think it's important to understand, or for people to get through their heads, that these are just humans, and they all need the basic same stuff. But when it comes to the standards piece, like in law enforcement, obviously, when you talk about officer-involved incidents and whatever those happen to be, and you've outlined a couple of what those might look and feel like that stuff changes. And the level of strength that you have to have, the level of resiliency that you have to have just to make it through the day, right, obviously gets amplified for these types of things. And it also is proven that the fitter officers are less likely to get injured in general. Mm-hmm. And it's also been proven statistically that so do the people that you're detaining, right? There's less injuries when that officer is more physically fit and more skilled with the hands-on piece of the job. So again, it makes sense. It makes sense for everybody, for officers to be more fit. So again, I'm preaching to the choir. I get that. Most people listen to this, so like, okay, get to the point. Okay, so if we look at other standards in other departments or agencies or things that you've been involved in or seen out there, is anybody having any success here? Or is there a model that could be adopted and modified, much like this group that you were working with was doing that would equate to a better overall evaluation of fitness as it relates to the job the job tasks that an officer has to do?
Yeah, so there's fitness incentives. A lot of agencies have them. My girl's agency has a great fitness incentive. I think you pass the PT test at a certain standard and you get 3 days off. And you could do that
Right.
up to 4 times a year. So that's 12 days of paid time off that you get just for passing PT tests. And then there's some that, you can get 8 hours. But I know her agency has had a lot of success, and then I've seen other agencies that have had no success with that.
Large, medium, or small agency?
Her agency is about 800, I believe, 8 or 900.
Wow.
So a larger agency.
Okay, so they've made an investment in this, like 12 days off. Like, let's say you had 800 officers who were actually meeting the standard. That's a lot of dollars in payroll, right? Being paid out for people not to work. So there's an investment there. Obviously, not all 800 are going to do that. I wonder what percentage of people actually do that. Do you have any idea?
I only know what she tells me. I've never actually seen it, but I do believe they get a good turnout.
Okay.
I'd say less than 50%, but still a good turnout nonetheless.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
50% is great, actually. I think particularly in the context of what we're talking about. Do you have any idea what the standards are?
I think they use the Cooper standard.
Okay.
They might have changed it. I'm not sure.
All right. So I think at this point we can probably also agree that the Cooper standard is kind of a bare minimum standard, and that everybody should be passing that because you should have had to pass it in the academy. So to be asking people to pass it afterwards and be able to continue to do that through their career is not unreasonable. Agreed?
Agreed. Absolutely.
All right. And what that agency is saying is, like, as long as you can just maintain these minimums, we're going to actually reward you for maintaining what we could consider a minimum standard. What other models, if any, have you seen that from a fitness standards testing protocol procedure, I guess kind of framework, do you think could fit better for law enforcement or are already fitting well for law enforcement and have had some success?
I don't know if it's being done now, but I know the Army recently changed their fitness test to ACFT, Army Combat Fitness Test, and it's a 5-event. I believe it's 5 events, 5-event test that I feel would definitely be more applicable towards law enforcement. The old Army PT test used to be push-up, sit-ups, 2-mile run, and now they've gone to it's deadlift, standing power ball throw, sprint drag carry, like a subtle hand release push-ups, plank, and what else is a 2-mile run, obviously.
Okay.
And I feel like that would be a little more applicable in terms of the strength piece for law enforcement.
So we're testing strength, right? We're testing power, right? That's going to be that med ball throw, right? And do you know if there's is there a male and female component here?
There is male and female standards.
Okay. I'm down with that.
I feel like they're similar in the minimums. Like, I don't know the minimums, to be honest with you. But I feel like they're very close in certain arenas.
No, I think that's very reasonable, especially on the strength and the power side of things. Look, you can't have an argument that, I'm not saying that you've made this argument, but you can't have an argument that men shouldn't be competing, biological men shouldn't be competing in female athletics or female sports, and then also acknowledge the reasons why they shouldn't be competing there, and then come to a standard like this and say it should be a level playing field across the board. You cannot do that. So there is some adjustments that need to be made there. What those should be and how they should be made. Again, that's another problem that needs to be solved inside the setting of standard. But I don't think it's that hard to do if you can get some agreement on what the basic things should be. And again, there's the strength piece, there's the power piece, there was a capacity piece there, which involves both strength and power, right? That would be the drag. I think you said it was the carry.
The sprint drag carry, yes.
The carry. And then there's the endurance piece, the 2-mile run, which I actually think is probably more valuable than the if you're trying to measure that endurance piece, maybe a little bit more valuable than the 1.5 miles. I don't know. There's argument. I would definitely debate myself on that. And then the push-ups and the sit-ups are what they are. I think there's some muscular endurance stuff there. It's also there's also a mobility piece there on the push-up side and making sure you're training properly and you can get up off the ground and stuff like that. I know a lot of people that are piss strong, right? But if they fell down on the ground, watching them try to get up is a whole different thing. So there's that piece too. All right. So there are people. The Army standard could be one way to implement it, and federally we're already implementing that in some way. So it could be adopted over. Okay, so you go to this thing, you learn about this thing on how to implement the program. You learn a bunch of stuff you didn't know, which is the point. Then you go back to the agency that asked you to go do this thing. What happens?
Yeah, we put together a little pitch, and we were pretty much shot down almost automatically. With the reason being, we have a lot of sick and unhealthy officers in the agency, and you know, take that for what you will. How do you answer that? I decided maybe strategically it wasn't best to argue it too much, and just try and take the path of least resistance and just have the impacts that I could in the arenas that I could versus, fight the try and die on that hill. Probably wouldn't have been worth it.
I mean, I guess I go back to like moral injury number 2, right? So there's a standard that you really don't have to meet. And then a captain comes to you and says, hey, would you like to go to this thing to help us get better? They put out finance, they put out time, you put out time, energy, I imagine maybe some time away from the family, to go do this thing. You're required to probably meet some standards at this thing. You do that, you do the work, you come back, you do the work to put together a pitch, you go to leadership, you go, hey, here's how we might do this. And then they go, yeah, never mind, we're not doing that.
Pretty much, in a nutshell.
I mean, I don't really know what to say about that. I guess if I'm you at that point, given what you know and what you've experienced, I'm probably not going to re-engage in this at any level whatsoever. So I'll ask, did you at any point?
No, I just, the older you get, you pick your battles a little more strategically. And I decided, you know what? It's a losing battle, and you need to be realistic where it's like change is incremental. And this almost appears to be radical change within this agency. So you're probably going to meet a ton of resistance, so you do what you can. I slept well at night knowing I did my part, but, we just continue to try and inspire and help where we could in terms of fitness.
Man. Okay. So again, here's a guy that's been on an agency for a long time. He's been actually charged with going and try to help the agency in some way that he can. He goes out, he does that, he comes back, he's turned down. And I say this all the time. It's the dudes, it's the women and men like you that we need pushing this stuff, right? And when I say we, I'm talking from the public perspective now, to raise standards, to at least try to establish one, or maybe raise the current one that we have a little bit more from where it's been backed off. And then you do this. And so now you have a guy, and forgive me, hopefully this isn't insulting, you've just disenfranchised a dude that was more than willing to, and you actually paid him to go. Now you've disenfranchised him where he's not interested anymore at helping the agency. But I wonder how what you said was you were trying to be encouraging and whatnot. What does this turn into? I mean, how do you approach those that want to be helped after something like that? And I mean, can you even find success in it anymore, or do you just feel like you're spinning your wheels?
No, I didn't feel like I was spinning my wheels. You can do little things that can help change a culture too. Like in our gym, we had a whiteboard, and we would just throw workouts up on the board. Try me. And guys would write on it, and some guys would, talk crap, and then some guys would actually do it. And then, it spurs conversations like, oh, I did it in this time, I did it in that time, and you're starting to change the culture just a tiny bit, and when I got on, smaller units of, hey, let's all work out together, and, the unit I went to was pretty cool. They had already been doing that. So we had unit workouts, and, you win the battles that you can, and you reach one or two people here or there. It sounds preachy, but it's the truth, right? You can't reach them all. You have to set a realistic expectation. So it's like, hey man, I did my part. I did what I could with what I had to work with.
So that's the other thing that I hear other folks like you talking about, which is like, look, these are likely the battles you're going to run into. You just gave one that I hadn't heard before, which was like an agency actually looked interested or seemed interested in actually changing this thing, and they invested into the particular change. And then when they came back and maybe were faced with the realities of it, of what that is, I don't know if the decision to not follow through is based on the realities of what you're telling them in their pitch and how much work that would actually be to get done and what that would actually mean for the agency. Or if it's just somebody's on a whim just going, nah, I don't think this is really important. They just don't value it anymore. But the point being, the guys that or the folks that really are making a difference are the ones that are just trying to change culture and not change a standard. They recognize how the standard can be beneficial, but they're recognizing this is more of a cultural problem. And that's the kind of the piece I want to move into here in terms of changing the culture and what are the missing pieces to doing that, because the hardest thing to change in any institution or organization is that very thing, which is culture, obviously. My experience with that sort of in corporate, in the commercial world is that is a very large undertaking, which starts with everybody being on the same page. And it seems like in the institutional law enforcement, that's never going to be the case. Nobody's ever going to be on the same page, right? You have those that are doing the job and those that are, the administrators. The most successful companies that I've ever worked with are very aligned on both goals and values. And those are very clearly outlined on what those things are. But when you can't get alignment there, it doesn't mean culture can't change, but it's going to change in one of two ways. It's either going to get better or it's going to get worse. So I want to talk about how to change it for the better from the inside without necessarily having a standard to work from, and maybe creating sort of a social structure within the culture that kind of comes up with this on their own. And maybe it's not so clearly defined as what it is, but you mentioned something there about writing workouts up on the board and then people maybe recording their times, and it's public, right? And so people are recognizing like, oh, so-and-so just did this workout and he beat me. Well, that higher achiever is going to be like, well, that can't happen. Like, I don't like the way that feels, right? So I'm going to work harder. I'm going to try harder. I'm going to try to beat him. That goes up on the board. Now we just switch places. And maybe it's not whatever those workouts are. I don't know. Maybe it's on the jujitsu mat, or maybe it's in the weight room, or maybe it's in the obstacle course that gets run, or whatever the case is. Culture change starts with people within that culture wanting it to change and being a participant of that. So I wonder, what are the things that could be done? You just mentioned a couple of them. What are the things that could be done, or that you see other agencies or talk to other guys doing that is instituting that change without necessarily completely revamping the entire standards structure?
One thing I'm seeing, and I like it because I've seen it, both from the fitness portion and outside, like the firearms portion, is I believe that social media is helping change the culture of law enforcement. A lot of
Positively?
positively for the most, yeah, I'd say maybe 90% positively. I very
I love
rarely
that.
see some real anti law enforcement stuff on social media. Maybe it's just the circles I run in, but I don't almost ever see it. But these big companies or these big instructors, they're putting out great information, both fitness wise, firearms wise. There's competitive shooters, there's military dudes, there's cops. I just had a phone call last night with a guy from retired cop from California doing a ton of great things out there. He's, hey man, let's get a collab class going. I'll come out here, and I'll go to Florida. You come to Cali. Awesome, man. It's just building this network, and then all the cops that follow these guys are seeing it. And I think, it's change is incremental, but it's slowly changing that culture, because you have guys out there saying, hey, look, man, the minimum standards are just not good enough, both fitness wise, both firearms wise. It's just not going to get you through. And then you could post evidence of it. Look at this video. Look at this OIS. Look at this fight. Look at this foot chase. Look at how poorly this officer performed. It's putting people on the spot. But at the same time, guys are like, I don't want to act like that. No, I don't want to end up on a video on social media getting slammed because I can't perform my job.
Yeah, so the power of social media, I think, is huge. It's interesting you brought that up. I didn't see that one coming, actually, and the positivity piece, because again, like my kind of lately, my journey has just been around like trying to find answers to try to bring meaningful conversations to this subject matter and try to get things moving, and it's all been through social media.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, it sort of initiates there, and then you get connected with somebody, and then you're having phone calls or doing podcasts or whatever else. But it's from those people that are actually out there doing work like that and trying to have these more productive conversations. I love that, and I don't think that I'd actually put that together. That there is room for people to get together, no matter where they fall in the hierarchy of their particular department, leadership wise, whatever their experience levels. If you want to be a part of changing something, you can be, and it doesn't necessarily have to start inside the agency. In terms of your current agency, in terms of changing culture, it can start more globally, and then maybe infiltrate the agency based on the things that you learn and you get yourself involved
Mhm.
in. That's interesting.
I mean, I've been at
Yeah,
trainings. I've been at trainings where someone's come up to me and say, "Hey, so and so posted this drill on Instagram. Did you see that? What do you think of that?" I did it in this time, and I'm like, "Oh, okay. This guy, this person's actually, pursuing something, seeking knowledge or running this drill, or hey, can we do this drill at training? So and so posted it the other day, and I would take a look. Yeah, sure, we'd probably do that.
you're talking about the shooting side of things.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So obviously that's a huge one, and this is the challenge in the fitness versus the shooting thing, and that is shooting is always going to get in this particular genre is always going to
yeah.
get more attention, right, than the fitness stuff ever is. Um, but it's so similar, and that's what I recognized when I kind of got into it myself and started to try to understand it more, and looking at how the similarities between the fitness industry and the shooting industry, and those are both very broad, right? They're not there's a lot of different that flow chart and those Venn diagrams are very they expand out for miles.
Mhm.
But my point of that is the way it's presented on social media is very much the same, and there's ego. There is this. It's this way and no other way. There's the tribes. It's very tribal,
For
and
sure.
it's very righteous. And I find that to be a real challenge with people trying to find the right answers. And where it shifted, and this is what happened in the fitness industry, and I feel like the shooting industry, particularly like practical shooting, and particularly as it falls into this genre here, is I think the shooting thing is about 10 years behind where fitness was, right? Well, fitness shifted, right? It started with, the people with their shirts off, and their, and, pitching a supplement or pitching a workout or whatever else based on the way they looked and how they were seemingly performing in an Instagram post or on a YouTube video or whatever else, right? And then that shifted because people started to realize the reality of that, and they were being sold something, and that there was something more to this. And then it shifted to being much more educational. And it took a while, and those people that were into the education side of it that weren't necessarily, they didn't want to be seen as a fitness model. They wanted to be taken seriously as a professional, started putting out more educational content. And they just kept doing it. And so what they were able to do is bring over a certain part of that population to, oh, there is something more to this, and I can actually learn something from this person. And it's not filled with ego, and it's not filled with selling a product all the time. It is about providing something better for the end user, whatever that happens to be. And it's a much harder path to take. It is a much harder path to take. It takes a lot longer, right, to build an audience. It takes a lot,
Hmm.
and but at the same time, and all of it from a social media perspective, there's a business piece attached to it. That is what Instagram is. That is what YouTube is. But these folks that were more on the education side were more about, if I continue to teach these people something, and I can engage them in some kind of a way that has some type of value to it, maybe they'll come to the trough and buy my product. But I'm totally okay with them going over and buying this other person's product. One, because I know that's going to happen anyway, and two, because this other person over here is doing a great job with it too. There's nothing wrong with
Hmm.
it. The
Yeah.
firearms industry, shooting industry is finally starting to get there. It's still a little bit behind the curve, but it's finally starting to get there.
Yeah, and there's good dudes out there, both in the firearms and fitness community that are just there to put info out. I had a conversation with someone the other day where they were like, "Dude, you got to figure out how to monetize everything you're doing. Stop giving everybody all the answers." I'm like, "Why?
Right.
Like, well, I'm in it for. I'm not in it for the income, not the outcome. Like it's I want to give people this information. Like I don't want to charge you for it, not in certain aspects, but I do have a business to run too. But guys who hoard information and hey, pay me and I'll tell you, that's just the wrong way to present things.
Well, I think it's very short term mentality, because at some point you've spent more time trying to sell stuff than you have been trying to provide a good product, and that ultimately catches up. And I think we're starting to see that shift happening sort of in the firearm space, in the shooting space, shooting instruction space, and people are trying harder. So as it comes back to fitness, I think there's a lot of room right now to be talking to that shooting crowd, or to the more specifically what we're talking about today is that law enforcement crowd, about the fitness stuff and what matters and what doesn't matter. And hopefully that starts to penetrate into a larger population and starts to maybe work its way up the chain, or that person that's now getting that and consuming that information and practicing those things and getting better ultimately finds themselves in a position where they do get tapped to maybe again be the champion of whatever it is that's going on in that agency, or has ultimately walks into leadership and they hold a position of influence at a different level and can start the change. So this goes all the way back to the social media thing, and just terms of people collaborating. And again, that was sort of my goal in having these conversations with people and kind of having the individual conversations, and then hopefully that helped those, maybe some of those connections start to the bridge, or the gap starting to be bridged a little bit more. And selfishly, part of it for me was just to learn more about it so that I could give to it somehow. Like I don't make any money off of this, right? That's not the intention of having the conversation. I just hear the conversations happening, and there's, see, again, we haven't quite come to a solution yet. So how do we get to that solution? And everybody wants to talk about, well, you have to have a standard. Yes, we're agreed. We're all agreed. There has to be a standard, and people should be held accountable to it. But in all the things that you've said, like, look, it's not that simple. You can't just set a standard and expect that, number one, everybody's going to want to do it. Number two, that everybody can do it. Number three, you have to be realistic about how long it would take to get somebody to get there. And there are things, there's information you may not have. Like, is that even legal, bro? Like, can you even do that right now? People want to see people getting fired for not meeting a standard. Well, that's never going to happen, at least not in my lifetime. It may happen at some point at some agency, but not in my lifetime. People are not getting fired for not meeting a fitness standard. But the other part of, I think the bigger piece of this is the education piece and the misconceptions. And part of the challenge, I think, is that you have people that don't have much of an education or a background in this stuff that have been charged with being the champion that are now providing the education. Um, that's what we saw in shooting, right?
Mhm.
They had a great Instagram page and now they're the educator. No, dude, that's not good what you're doing right there. There's a lot of missing pieces because you haven't had the experience, you don't have the background to really understand how to explain the thing that you're doing. You're very good at the thing, but you don't have a good foundation for how to explain that thing. And part of that's education, part of it's experience. It's the successes and failures that come with the experience, the education.
Yeah, well, teaching is
To
a different skill in its entirety, right? Like
100%.
the ability to execute the process to get to where you want to be is one thing, and then the ability to explain the process to someone who has no idea, that's an entirely different skill set. I know guys that are such high performers, but you ask them how they do it, they're like, "I don't know, man, I just do it. I just do it." And you're like, "Ah, it didn't help me." But the ability to teach is entirely different.
Yeah, so this goes all the way back to the beginning then, in terms of like the I'll call it the broken model of law enforcement training, and who's teaching, right? And what our expectations are in terms of having officers that understand how to do the things well, but more importantly, how to train to get better over the longer term. So, like, how are people being picked to train at the academy at the different things that they have to do? Right, whether that's the DT guy, whether that's the fitness guy, whether that's the shooting instructors from the range team, whatever else. How are they being picked? Are they being picked because they're the best shooters? Are they being picked because we just need to put a butt in the seat? Um, Somebody said last night, or on one of your posts the other day, I believe it's he goes by Rico the red shirt, Rico
Yeah,
red
yeah,
shirt,
yeah, yeah.
right? He's great. I think I
He's
find him
funny.
pretty
He's super
I
funny.
find him pretty entertaining. But his statement basically was this, and that is, most of law enforcement training is half baked, right? So you there's good intention, and you have some ingredients, but the cake tastes like shit, or it maybe even looks like shit too. So you can have all the ingredients in the world, but if you don't understand how to bake the cake, the end result is not going to be very good. And you can't expect that everybody's going to like chocolate, right? So you might want to understand how to make a vanilla, as well,
Mhm.
or something else. And it, again, just searching for these individual components of ingredients doesn't mean that cake is going to taste good. It's how they all come together. They all come together in the end. And so, again, going back to the education piece and this kind of this broken model, I feel like the education is lacking right from the get-go, and that starts at the academy level when we're speaking specifically to the fitness piece. And you're part of what you're doing with Apex is giving some people some insights to things that you may be wanting to do right now to set yourself up for success, not just to get through or to and through the academy, but beyond. And I asked this question at the beginning, which is how many of those people actually understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. And I know there are agencies out there that have actually put in these education programs into their academies and even a pre-academy, which is kind of what you're doing, right? At Apex, like they're going through like a pre-academy to the academy, and you can give them, this is where you could be spending some time giving them this information. And you can't just pick a dude, right? There has to be certain skills that beyond this guy passes the PT test every time, or he's the PT stud on the department or whatever. You have to be able to invest in these people and then give them the resources and the ability to actually get this information out, not send them away to whatever courses and then come back. Yeah, we decide we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
And so I wonder how you might see that, from the fitness education perspective, where it might start, from on the law enforcement side of things, and how could something like that be implemented beyond just meeting a PT standard?
Well, it's a multifaceted problem, right? So it's obviously going to require a multifaceted solution, but you could just start with the low hanging fruit, and correlating this to the Army. If you look at military special operations, they started hiring professionals in the fitness world, started teaching these guys and training these guys and dietitians. And now, obviously, not every agency can do that, but I'm pretty sure you could, if you really wanted to, eliminate some kind of useless position and bring on a dietitian or bring on some kind of, nutrition coach or some kind of personal trainer that's just offering things. It's really not out of the realm of possibility. Guys that say it is, it drives me crazy because I'm like, if you knew how much money law enforcement agencies waste on nonsense, if you trim the fat in one area and just put like a physical therapist or a personal trainer, somebody educated in fitness to start mentoring your officers, you get more longevity out of them. It'll save you in insurance comp claims down the line. It'll help you, help them, execute their job a little better. It is possible. And then the other thing would be just, get a standard on the board. It doesn't even have to be a high standard. Just put a standard on the board. Change is incremental. So if there is no standard, just try and get one. It could be a very low standard. And over time, you're playing the long game. In 10 years, maybe you get that standard raised a little more. But if you're starting with nothing and you have something, that's like 100% return on your investment.
This is my point, right? So, man, you're not the first person to tell me that either. Like, just with regard to like, look at all the positions that exist out there, and let's look at production. Like, what are you actually bringing to the table, and what is that actually equating to at the end, for the money that we're spending? And the other part you said there about like, hiring some outside person, like people from the fitness industry and most of the good ones, at some point, yes, you need to make money on this, but they do it for free. Like they do it at a reduced rate
Mm-hmm.
just to be part of the solution process. And then they would do it. And this is what like personal training, nutrition coaching is like in the commercial sense, is that you have to perform. You're basically you're auditioning to get that person to continue to and sign up with you, as their personal trainer or as their nutrition coach or whatever. And a lot of times that starts with a very discounted rate or nothing at all. It's like, look, let's just have a conversation about this. Let me see if I can help you a little bit. And if this seems like the right fit for you, then we can talk about the next thing. This is about what this would cost you or whatever else, in order to continue to invest in this thing over a longer term. But allow me the opportunity to help out here. And you said it, and that is going outside the agency for somebody that is willing to do that, that also has some level of qualification to do it for you. But I think the bigger part is like the willingness. Like, and there's so many people out there that don't have anything better to do than to talk about fitness and educate
Mhm.
people on nutrition and all, and all, and all that stuff. That's what they do. It's what they want to do. Give them an opportunity to do it. Just like
Mhm.
on the shooting side as one of those things. Somebody, I was talking to an officer the other day about like driving. Like I the I think I heard another guy talking about it the other night on in some format. I can't remember what it was. Like if you're hiring somebody for driving, like I want a race car driver. Like I
Yeah.
want to understand, like, and he doesn't need to know what my job is. Like I just need him to teach me how to drive, right, and drive really well. He doesn't have to have done my job. Like that's not important here. We are way outside the lines if we start getting into that conversation in presenting scenarios. The scenarios are going to come up, and you can't practice the scenarios and expect to have any level of success if you don't have the basic skill and knowledge in order to be able to perform the thing. So, and how many races has that guy won? Right, was part of the question. Like, don't just tell me you can do it. Tell me what you've done. Vet the people is kind of is the thing, but come in and hire people from the outside to give you this information and allow them when I say this, I guess it's like shop. Like there's so many of them out there, so it doesn't have to just be one person. And if you don't like the first answer you get, then go to the next person. Um, and back to your standards piece. Look, okay, let's just pick the Cooper standard. Like let's just pick that and just put it out there. Like, okay, our goal is to make sure everybody can obtain this. Now, there's going to be a certain percentage of your officers. Certainly, you would have been one of those guys. Who's like, well, this is a little low. But if you could get around your head around it from a mindset perspective and go like, okay, well, what's the majority of the people on this team? If we looked at it from a team perspective, going back to all the different clubs and segments and whatever factions that exist out there, where do we get the most bang for my buck? I got to be honest. For me, it would be focusing on the lowest performers, right? Which is going to be a large percentage of most departments in at least in the information that I have. There is a very large population of people that just need help, right? They need help to understand what to do and how to do it from a structure and a framework perspective to get better. And yes, they should be working towards, if we've decided, this Cooper standard. What are the things we need to give them in order to get there? There's a massive population of people that need that shit. And we're not giving it to them. Instead, we're just complaining about it, or as an agency or people within the agency, or there's people like you that are outreaching and trying to do stuff through social media or talking to other people and starting businesses to do it. And I think it's smart because I think there's money in marketing to somebody and giving them a solid quality product that prepares them for the thing that they're going to do, especially if they know that the place that they're going is going to give them the bare minimum, the very bare minimum, in some cases not even have a bare minimum in order for them to do that job. I think it's smart. I think it's a smart play. Um, I'm not in that business, right? I'm in the fitness business in general, but I'm not in the business of preparing law enforcement officers at Red Dot Fitness or future law enforcement officers. However, I feel pretty confident if somebody came to me, and I have worked with a few, um, I could I could help them probably do better than just showing up. Um, and again, the to come down on somebody, you said I'm not in it for the income, I'm in it for the outcome. I also think it's very important that people get their head around the mindset that not everything should be fucking free. That bothers me. That bothers me going back to being bought into something. And that's why I asked the question earlier about like these people that are coming to you, these candidates that are coming to you. Do you find a higher commitment level from those that are actually have to pay out of their own pocket and go through this thing on their own versus already being subsidized by an agency? And you said, no, it depends. Okay. All right. I honestly, I didn't think I'd hear that, but
Yeah,
if that's what it is,
just
it's what
going,
it is.
yeah, going to just back to my experiences at the academy, both as a student and teaching it. It was, I saw self sponsors that I was like, dude, you're wasting your money. Yeah, it's like you don't care. Why are you paying if you don't care? And then you saw guys that were sponsored, and I was like, well, it makes sense. He's getting paid just to be here, and they don't require anything more than that at this point. So, okay, I guess I get it. But I think it's a very individual thing. Personally, I self-sponsored, and there was no way in hell that I was allowing anything to chance, and I was going to give 100, no less than 100%, to get maximum return on what I was paying for. But some people, not everybody looks at it that way. It's mind-boggling, but it's a reality.
Yeah, that's the chief complaint that I hear out there is like, why wouldn't an officer want to be better at this? Why don't they see value in training this particular thing or in this particular way? Why don't they spend more time at the gym? Why do they eat like this? Why don't they go to the range and use the range time, the little range time? Well, it's only because I have 50 rounds, a month. I'm only allotted 50 rounds a month. Well, fuck, you can do a lot with 50 rounds. Mm-hmm. Why aren't you at least doing that? There's a lot of complaints, right? Versus like, what are the solutions within the resources that do exist? That challenges me quite a bit.
And I think my favorite saying is, you don't know what you don't know. A lot of the problem that I've seen with officers, and I've seen it in the military too, and I've seen it in the civilian sector, is people are products of their environment. So when they're told they're good enough at that bare minimum standard, and they haven't been shown unequivocally that you're not good enough, they don't know any better. So they're just going to keep walking around in ignorant bliss. Yep, I'm good. Well, I passed my PT. That they said that's good enough, so I'm good enough. Oh, I passed my qual. They said that's good enough. I'm good enough. And then something will happen. And I actually know somebody who was involved in a shooting not too long ago, and they were like, "Uh-oh." They're like, I didn't do too well. I came out on top, luckily, but I didn't do too well. And now that's spurred a change in them to where now they're training all the time. But prior to that day, they thought they were fine, right? Because the agency said, hey, man, you're fine. You passed the qual. You're good. And then real life came in and bit them in the behind real quick and said, no, you're not, dude. You need to step it up.
Yeah. So again, that goes back to like, change usually happens when something really bad happens, right? Mm-hmm. They have to be forced that way to make it. So I guess my last question here is the answers, or are the answers to this, to the fitness end of things in terms of getting to and maintaining a higher level standard, are those answers located inside the institution of law enforcement, or are they outside?
I would say there's more information outside now than inside, unfortunately. People just invest in the private sector. They invest way more into, niche markets than, the agencies has its main concerns. It's staffing, the shifts, getting calls for service. They have 1,000,001 things that they're worried about. And I would say fitness probably falls 99 out of 100 on the list. Other agencies may be different, but just in my experience on the whole, fitness has never been a huge priority to people. And so I encourage everybody, go seek stuff outside your agency. And a lot of other cops will, probably agree with me on this one. Don't ever wait for your agency to train you in something. Mm. If you feel you need it, regardless of what it is, it's out there somewhere in the private sector. Go find it, invest in yourself, and get it done.
So outside of like Apex, and the things that you're doing there and kind of the information you're providing, who do you suggest people, like, if, again, you mentioned the power in social media, and I would agree, it's a hugely powerful tool if used properly and appropriately. But like, who do you go to? Like, I mean, who do you like watching? Who do you think's putting out great information right now? Like, if you're encouraging people, like, if you don't want to take my word for it, if you want to take Pat's word for it, like, who might you, who influences you, man? Who do you go to?
There's tons of guys that I speak to on a daily basis. I'm honored to even talk to them. There's Survive Policing is a big page on Instagram. Police Posts, Effective Fitness Training, with Jay Wadsworth. Who else? Adam Hyderi. Mm-hmm. There's tons of guys out there that are just cranking the info out. It's all there at your fingertips, man. It's all there. Pillar Training Institute out in California. Jason Paletta, super cool dude.
I know Jason.
Yeah. Yep. Matt Pranka, X-Ray Alpha, Mike Pannone, CTT Solutions. I mean, all the info you would want is out there. You just go hit these guys up, and they're all very personable. They'll talk to you. They'll answer you. It's a shame that, either people don't know it's out there, or they know it's out there and they're just not doing it, but either way, it's there for you.
Yeah, I think that's the message, is that it is, and it's free, by the way. Like, like if you want to go take a course and they're giving up their time, there's a fee for service there. Absolutely. But that is how I got started in the whole podcast game in this thing, was doing exactly what you just said, like just reaching out to people and seeking more, like not with no expectation on their end or my end, just like, hey, I have a question about this. Would you mind? You just mentioned a bunch of people there that I feel very fortunate to have relationships with, because I did that and they did that for me. And some of those guys actually reach out to me for questions now, which is I'm completely honored by, because now I'm able to give back, and
Mhm.
I go to the ends of the earth to help some of those, those guys in whatever way I could, in anything that they needed help with. And so, um, again, you mentioned a lot of names there. The Survive Policing, we're trying to connect at the end of January. We're recording this in January. We're trying to connect at the end of this month. Hopefully, we'll be able to get that done.
Yeah,
There's a
super
couple
cool,
other,
dude.
yeah, some of those guys I've had on the show. Some of them are we're planning to have them on to basically just do this, to have that conversation. But you mentioned something there that triggered something for me. I just spent 2 days at with a couple of local agencies at a training course, and um, I would say the best shooter, this is a shooting training, firearms training course. I would say the best shooter there has never sought outside agency training. Never been to an outside agency training, and was completely unfamiliar with any of the names that you just said. But has sought information and gone and practiced a lot on his own to get to the level that he was at. I was very impressed. He was very good in terms of a lot of training that I've been to that are
Mhm.
largely law enforcement. He was very good at it, and so even without social media, he was able to get quite a bit better and get a lot of questions answered, and then put some things into practice. But when you think about what you said there and how free it is, and you made a really good point there, how willing people are to give this information and have these conversations with you. The fact that people won't take advantage of it, I don't think not knowing how to take advantage of is an excuse anymore. I think it comes down to will, right? You either want to or you don't want to. And I know it's very frustrating, maybe for you or me to kind of understand, like, why wouldn't you want to get better? I
Right.
understand there's a large part of the population that doesn't care. Again, it was hugely shocking to me when I started to realize that. I was like, well, this is weird. I got it from the fitness side, like from the like commercial, like civilian market. Like, I get it. Like, there's just people that don't care. They want the easy button, or it just never comes across their mind. But when I started to kind of study the law enforcement profession, and I started to recognize how many of those humans, and they're the same humans, don't value it at all, it shocked me. And I was
Mhm.
like, this is wild, because there's so many resources out there for you. And like you just mentioned, like the your wife's agency, where that provides an incentive for you to be somewhat fit, right?
Right.
Not even at a high level. Like, you get 12 freaking days off. Like, I don't know a lot of employers that give that many days off a year, period. Not that you could earn it, or earn extra days, that kind of stuff. Like, I don't know why you wouldn't want to do that. It was very hard for me to comprehend. So again, going out there, like, if we just boil this down to, these are just humans that need to get better. There's a few things that, just to wrap up here. One, if you're one of those officers that is fit, takes your fitness and your profession very seriously, and you're training all the things all the time, maybe give a little grace to those that are struggling to even, not because they're out of shape, um, but give a little grace to how different they are from you in terms of their mindset. But not that they don't care. I think there's a lot of people that don't know. You just said it, like, they don't know what they don't know. So, and they're intimidated by you, right? And because they feel like they already know what the answer is going to be if they asked you, and the answer is going to be embarrassing.
Mhm.
That they're dumb, and that asking that I'm only going to be asking dumb questions. I'm going to insult that guy, and then I'm going to be shamed. I think there's some social currency in shaming people a little bit, right? But I don't think it can dominate that conversation. I think you get a lot more out of encouragement and sitting down and taking the time to have conversations with people and invite them in. A lot of the people that you're talking about is like, you invite people to talk to you. All the dudes I talk to that are current law enforcement, that are really trying to change culture, are the same guys that are like trying to pull, recruits in on off time, or they're trying to pull the new guy in on the off time to like go through a workout together, or go to the shooting range together, or talk about the job and the things that they need to get better at beyond shooting and beyond shooting and fitness, but like how to handle calls differently or whatever. They're going out and they're touching people. They're not waiting for people to come to them. And so it doesn't have to be on social media. It could be done at the agency level. And these guys have had tremendous success with that.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
they're not trying to change 100 people. They're just trying to change it, kind of one person at a time. I'm rambling a little bit here, but the makeup of the folks that are really trying to encourage this change is what I just said. And I believe there's a lot of those people out there. They just might not feel like it's their place to do it, or they're not sure how to do it. So I know you were that guy. You talked to me a little bit the other day about your wife being that person as well. If you were going to encourage or give advice to people that recognize there's a problem, they want people to get better, they're not in that position of, a physical fitness instructor or, whatever at the academy or whatever else, what advice would you give them in terms of helping those people that they're closely surrounded by?
You just speak up. It's really that simple. Just speak up. It's as simple as, hey, I'm going to start working out every day at the end of shift. Who wants to come with me?
Mm.
Little things that you could do, these little micro gestures here and there. Hey, I think I'm going to go to the range on Tuesday. Who wants to come with me? Hey, I think that's how it starts. And it builds from there. It builds from there. Because then, oh yeah, it comes, it turns into, yeah, every Tuesday, my whole unit goes to the range. Yeah, we always work out at the end of shift together. But it starts with that one little minor thing.
Just the invitation.
Right. Yeah. And if they don't do it, they don't do it. It's okay. It's fine. Just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, you're going anyways, right?
Yeah,
you're going anyways. It's like I'm with you on that. I mean, I remember getting started in this field, and how I got started was I was the guy that was always in the gym, and based on the results that I was getting, and I was trying to be friendly with everybody. When I was focused, people would come in, they would ask me questions, and I liked helping people, right? And there was a lot of shit I didn't know. I probably should go back, if I could go back in time and apologize to people for giving people poor advice or whatever. But the point was the intention was there. And I probably overcommitted at times to trying to helping people. But over time, it actually turned into a career. It was suggested to me, there was an invitation made to me by an owner/trainer at that particular gym that said, dude, you're kind of good at this. Like, if you did a couple more things, you could be really great at this. Why don't you come and see kind of what we do? And then ultimately I was hired, and then, they helped finance some education for me and whatever. And that was 27 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But it started with an invitation. And so maybe just being a little bit more open and forthcoming and more proactive with the invitations for those that you feel like you can help or want to help. Start with those people,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Don't go to the people that don't want help. Like, it's, as a trainer, when you get hired on and you hit the fitness floor, the first thing they do is like, you got to go prospect. This is how it worked, at least in the environment I was in. It's like, you got to go out to the floor and you got to talk to people. You got to try to find clients. don't go to the biggest guy in the room and try to tell him that he's doing his arm curls wrong. That's not the place to start. Start with the people that are generally trying hard at all the other things, but are obviously lacking in certain things. Ask a couple of questions and invite them out. I mean, it seems practical. It's work. It takes a little energy, but I think there's a lot of value in that in terms of bringing people together and getting people a little further down the line. And again, like you said, it's changing one person, 1%, at a time. Man, just in wrapping this up and kind of finalizing things today, what can you tell us about Apex, what it's doing, what exciting is coming down the pipe, and what do you want people to know about why they should maybe come to your page, check you out, or maybe get to one of your courses and check those out?
Yeah, so we have the firearms course. As always, all our firearms courses are listed on our website, apextrainingconcepts.com. On Instagram is where we put the majority of our info out. We have our street trivia where we ask law enforcement related questions. We have Case Hub where we talk about ongoing cases or case law.
Case Hub, right?
Yeah. We just started yesterday our Street Eats portion where we're going to be talking about better alternatives to stuff we grab, in the middle of the night while we're on patrol. You can grab this or you can grab that, so we're going to be pushing out some recipes and some healthier alternatives that are easy to make, and require minor commitment, not a lifestyle change. Yeah. So, I mean, and then we're always there, shoot us a DM or email us, and we'll always, we do our best to respond as fast as possible.
Yeah, cool. I mean, I encourage, like, I already gave you a plug, at the beginning of why I think people should go to your page. You just mentioned all the things that you're doing. I think one of the things I've picked up is from you is that, again, you write a very even line, never too high, never too low. That's how you've handled yourself on this thing. But you do put some content out that I think grabs people's attention because it is very to the point. And unfortunately, in the social media world, I think people. I'm not saying you're doing a poor job or badly. I'm just saying when people see people getting straight to the point and being very, I don't want to say hard lined, but drawing a line, which is important. It's a standard, right? Right. Drawing a line. They might not fully understand or perceive where that thing is coming from. And so that's why I think these conversations are important. And so if you're following and you're looking at it consistently and you're basically engaging in that and you engage in that conversation, you're going to find out a little bit more about where you're coming from, which is why I wanted to have you on the show, is to give people a better perspective of who's behind that page. And, as you're growing it and doing the things that you're doing as a company, there's a lot of guys out there like you, man. And they're all trying to do the same things, which is just provide good content in a very practical way. And they're doing it in a way where they're not telling people they have to be perfect at something, but they're also calling out people that think they're perfect at something because they don't know what they don't know. And that's what I appreciate about you, man, is like, you think this is right. And I'm telling you, I'm trying to tell you nicely, no. Like, but I'm not going to throw it in your face. I'm just going to look, man, this could be a lot better. You might consider this. It's kind of that, and I think people need to be talked to that way. And I specifically think they need to be talked to through, like, on that platform, Instagram, because it is, I mean, the attention span, the time you have to get your point across is very short. Mm-hmm. It's very slim. So I think you guys do a really great job with it. So
thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Thanks for helping me understand things a little bit better through the things that you're putting out, and thanks for joining me today and getting into this conversation a little bit into the weeds on some stuff and sharing your story and your perspective on things.
Well, thank you for having me, man. It was an honor.
Yeah, you're welcome. Like I said, man, best of luck to you and the things that you're doing out there. And if there's anything I can do to help you with the stuff that you're doing and the conversations that you're trying to have with people or put you together with anybody, please don't hesitate to reach out. I appreciate you.
Likewise, man. Thank you.